Mr. Krabs, don't turn me into Marketable Plushie! No!
That was the voice work of one skeleton, I think. At this point, he is a whisper in the wind as far as internet presence goes, but in his time, he gave the world such gems as Kingpin loving the Mets, and he handed any company, franchise creator, and anything else with a recognizable mascot a tried, true, and incredibly adaptable format to promote that they in fact have a plush to market to you. Speaking of which, hi again guys, and say hello to this little guy right here. This is the official Kwite YouTubers plushie, and it is on sale today! I've had a plushie before, this little guy, and y'all seem to really dig his whole vibe, but the issue is that he had a limited run. For years, I've had people asking me to have another go at it, and people have been trying to resell that original plushie for as much as $350. And I'll tell you now, this one costs less than a tenth of that. And working with the good folk at YouTubers, I've made a new and more epic sauce version of the original. For one, this dude is just so much bigger, standing at 9 inches. I still adore my original little guy, but this one can fit whatever you want to put inside of it, and more importantly, it's much easier to cuddle. I hug this cute little idiot when I go to bed like I wish I could hug my younger self, a trauma I haven't gotten over that is surprisingly relevant to today's topic, but I mean, this thing has no legs, so it's canon compliant and prove that you don't need those limbs to stand up for yourself. There's also Easter eggs in this thing that y'all will have to explore my body to find. For example, you've got the signature happy eyes YouTubers is known for on the sunglasses, but when you lift the glasses up, those same little happy eyes are underneath as well. I really did go out loud the first time I saw that when we were prototyping it. I'm genuinely really happy with how this little fella came out, and I can't wait for y'all to get your hands on him if you so choose to give him a shot. And when you do get your hands on him, you can do whatever you want to me. Put it in the plushie pile, hug it, kick it, violate it. The world is your oyster. It's not like I could stop you. This is also a limited run though, and will only be available for the next 2 weeks. When November 5th gets here, this guy is gone forever. I am really hoping everybody who wants to get their hands on one of these is able to get in time, and I hope you guys are as excited about this as I am. And the reason I'm excited is twofold, because not only do I know a lot of y'all have wanted this for a while, but it has also become the perfect excuse to talk about a topic I've wanted to dive deeper on for ages now. That being the deeper mechanics of how exactly the "don't turn me into a marketable plushie" meme even works. The marketable plushie gag has remained surprisingly static as far as memes go. When people use it for an existing character, the humor usually comes from the agony a plushie is apparently capable of feeling if the screaming from when you get turned into one is anything to go by. And outside of that, exactly like I did in this video, it is almost always used the same way when the person saying the line is promoting a product they are directly tied to. No, don't turn me into a marketable plushie. Oh, too late. They already did, and you can buy it at the first link in the description. The marketable plushie's longevity as a meme, despite how little it's been iterated on, is an outlier. The only time a variant of it has gone meta that I can think of was when Sonic got his own OG plushie meme. And then, because of how self-propagating the Sonic fandom is, the things Sonic was getting turned into became more and more absurd. With the large variety of Sonic merch out there to make jokes about, people turned Sonic into pencils, and eventually it just kind of degraded into a meditation on what it meant for Sonic to be turned into Sega itself. And I think it's interesting that other memes where something is begging not to be turned into another thing, like "I don't want to be bread" or "everything is cake," had a lot more variation in their prime. But as memes, they faded much faster than the idea of a marketable plushie ever did, you know, considering one of them is still around in the zeitgeist. Unlike those two phenomena though, the marketable plush is more of a tool than a format. It addresses an endlessly repeatable scenario that creators like me see play out all the time. Like, I finally got my shot at becoming a plushie, an item I know my audience is interested in, and I'm excited to share with you. In the context of a tight-knit creator community, the plushie is an item to almost strive towards getting turned into, instead of a thing to look down on by calling it marketable. Like, yeah, I am marketable. No idea how I managed it, but I got there. Pretty cool, right? Question is, why are plushies a thing to strive towards being these days? We all had some attachment to them as children, so why do we now get excited when we see plushies today? Well, in decades past, there was a stronger stigma that plushies are for children, and you get made fun of if you were past the age of 8 and got caught still having a Webkinz collection. I had no shame about me, so I used to bring Pokemon plushies to high school and put them on my desk just to fiddle with. And yeah, I got some condescending looks, but I probably would have been slaughtered much more violently if I had done that in middle school. The truth is, plushies and stuffed animals as a market have grown massively in popularity with adults in recent years. A survey from 2017 found that most adults in America still have their childhood teddy bear, usually kept out of nostalgia or some sort of sentimentality. In 2018, a survey reported that 4 in 10 adults in America still actively sleep with some form of plushie. And when it comes to people in the modern day, closer to my age, that being Gen Z and millennials, plushies are no longer a thing you just keep from your childhood, but something you might buy more of as you get older. This, of course, got ancient folk who haven't gotten over the idea of being being perceived by other people to do their usual finger wagging. These young bucks need to grow up and stop liking things! But words aren't what talks in the realm of business. Money is! And the plushie market is projected to reach nearly $20 billion by 2034, with the main driver of this growth in the United States being cited as the demographics growing from both ends of the spectrum. Single-digit age motherfuckers are more enthusiastic about plushies than ever. And the way I see it, kids are showing more interest in plushies because of the sheer amount of marketable characters available for them to get attached to. See any FNAF-inspired mascot horror game trying to capture that same lightning in a bottle? Some games' characters are so good in their design that they've been able to ride on the strength of those mascots alone. See Rambly the raccoon of Indigo Park, one of the cutest little fuckers I've ever seen. The internet, which you'll find as we dive deeper into this topic, is the genesis of a lot of the current trends with plushies, and it's made it so a lot more of these recognizable characters can worm themselves into the wrinkles of the youth's brains. For instance, characters that blow up via brain rot content. Stuff like Skibbity Toilet, and specifically Siren Head, who got completely divorced from its original creator's grasp in the context it was originally created in. There's also characters from various media getting drafted into brain rot canon, like Baldy becoming a dude you see randomly popping up in a Squid Game 3D animation next to Freddy Fazbear, Bendy, and other indie darlings. All of this acting is another vector to get these characters appealing to kids. I don't think there's been a time in history with so many mascots vying for the attention of kids, and from across a variety of different mediums that have become accessible to them more than ever. Even if these characters hit more niche groups of people, iconography is stronger than ever. Making something cute to tie into anything you do is also incredibly effective. Less personable entities have found that creating a mascot or plush to represent the main thing that they're trying to get across is an effective way to get folk to remember your brand. Like Sonic the Hedgehog was originally created to be the face of Sega and directly counter Mario, but today the concept of him and the shit he gets up to in his games is the main appeal of his character. Whereas a museum or charity might create a character as the face of the organization more as a means to promote the main work they do, but also, of course, to sell merch. Now, the other growing demographic outside of children is people buying plushies as they get older, as aforementioned. Plushie brands are now trying to reconfigure their marketing to satisfy this new contingent of adults who are into shit that's cute. Build-A-Bear has added new 18-plus themed plushies, some just being collabs that generally appeal to adults, like a Nightmare Before Christmas plush, a kid-friendly but older piece of media that will resonate with folk who are adults now but watched that movie in their childhood, leaning into nostalgia. But there's also just bait for wine moms everywhere, like stuffed animals holding unopened bottles of booze, ones that already look like they're about to fall over from a long night of Pinot Grigio sipping. I feel like this shift comes from people my age living in an unprecedented era of liking things. The notion that things you enjoy have an expiration date on an age you have to stop enjoying them has kind of wilted away. I couldn't really give less of a fuck if you think I'm cringe for liking Sonic the Hedgehog as much as I do. Like, you're goddamn right. I'm excited to watch a little girl get shot next week, and then a second time in December. If you know, you know. As a result, people are a lot more willing to wear their interests on their sleeve. Buying these plushies is like buying any other collectibles. It's a form of self-expression. Your taste in plushies and the fact that you have a taste in plushies to begin with says something about you as an individual and can be an indicator of your personal interests and passions. See first name editor, last name Nina if you want a prime example. Her room is a Kirby and Sanrio museum. It boils down to basically, I just think this little fucker is neat. And you collect things that indulge this interest like anybody else would with any other hobby. You cannot tell me that it's been commonplace for people to have stamp collections for over a century, but plushies is where we should draw the line. An excellent motivator of this live and let live mentality with folk my age is that for a lot of us, stress and anxiety in the modern day can feel overwhelming to a fault. Even if things are materially better than in the past, the infrastructure of the internet and the information age makes you hyper aware of the bad shit that is still happening and creates active worry for what might happen in the future. Because what comes next is uncertain, and trying to get by is the name of the game. Plenty of folk are drowning in the enormity of everything, so it's gotten to a point where whatever gives you a modicum of joy, if it isn't hurting anybody, why on earth would I spend time genuinely hating on what you're doing with your life? I might poke fun, but it's not something I actually disapprove of, because why should I? And that's the thing. The main reason a lot of people cite it as why they held on to plushies from their childhood is for the nostalgia and familiar comfort that these plushies provided in the past. But, as several have pointed out, that nostalgia and what we're experiencing now, where younger adults are actively seeking out new plushies, is perhaps a downstream effect of childhood actually becoming a period of life to be nostalgic towards. Valerie Tripp, writing for The Atlantic, spoke on how childhood was not always a time where people felt the most free and with the least amount of responsibilities. Historically, kids were sometimes viewed as just tiny adults and blank slates of potential to be molded. Children died young all the time, often before they got anywhere close to being grown, whether from disease or food insecurity, you name it. In 1800, 46% of kids died before they turned 5, and that was cut in half only a century later by 1900. And 100 years might sound like a long time, but in comparison to how long it usually takes to lower infant mortality rates, this was basically a world record speed run. Even then though, the sanctity of childhood and what it represents is a relatively recent idea. In those same 1900s, children were still working in the mines and in deadly factories, doing hard labor at the stage of life when you were most physically vulnerable to adults pushing you around. Modern protections for children as we know them, like child labor laws and requiring children to go to school so that they, in theory, all get guaranteed some level education and nurture outside of the home, was only really codified in the United States during the 20th century. And recently, there are some standout moments that likely accelerated what was an ongoing trend of things traditionally seen as childish becoming more accepted to participate in as an adult. The pandemic for sure sped up the process. It was uniquely isolating for people, and as I'm sure we all did in our own ways, people looked to things that brought them comfort in the past, in a time where the comfort you'd physically find in people was rarer than ever. For many folk, this came in the form of plushies, causing people to return to those fluffy little bastards at a higher frequency than ever before. Brands like Squishmallow and Jellycat, which are still going strong now, saw massive spikes in sales in 2020. The pandemic was an era where the only means of mass communication was the internet. More people than ever were using social media to connect with each other, and it boosted the ever-growing process of democratization that community building was going through, where choosing who you surround yourself with socially was based more on shared interest and less on physical proximity, at least for those terminally online enough to know that was even an option. Many people became more comfortable in their interests because of the information age's heightened connectivity. The internet made it much easier to find people who share your interests no matter how niche. Furries, weebs, JPEG Mafia fans, and fan fiction authors all come to mind when you think of how decentralized and isolated these niche communities were in the late 1900s compared to now. The ability to not only know that more people like you out there exist, even if they aren't right in front of you, but also the ability to directly connect with them created spaces for niche interests no matter what they might be. And they thrived unlike they ever had before. Like say even just a few thousand people find each other on the internet, and suddenly that's a subculture that gets perceived by those outside of it, and the idea of said subculture becomes a nugget in the minds of outsiders as something that exists in the abstract. That broader publicity can act as a beacon for those who never considered someone else might share their niche interests, much less a community of like-minded people. To a certain point, the growth can be exponential, though it usually tops out at the higher plateau of an S-curve. This is even more true when the shared interest folk have is a thing only possible because of the internet, and for the purposes of this video, that thing being mainly social media, which basically birthed the modern idea of the content creator. The things people made in their homes were getting shared to a mass audience in a way not possible before the internet. This isn't like little sects of a really broad interest just connecting with each other for the first time. These are communities that were organically formed on the internet first. It can make a stronger and more centralized community around a singular thing that's native to the internet, where even if it's smaller, it's more cohesive and uniform than a more broad interest like being a furry ever could be. The attachment you have to a character you buy merchandise of exists when buying merch of a creator you like, but it's generally stronger. This is especially true with people like me who present themselves as kind of a caricature. Like look at this. Weird, right? Where the appeal of a character whose design and personality you vibe with still exist, but instead of this being someone fictional, that character is actually just some guy. A fella who, if you follow their work regularly enough, you probably have some level of personal investment in them. To me, what's usually compelling about following a creator over the years is watching their journey, seeing how you found them compared to where they are now. It reminds me of people saying, catch up on One Piece before it ends. That way you can experience what it's like to be a part of something so huge as it happens. You will be able to say, I was here. With creators, we all have to publicly build ourselves up to wherever we are today. So getting to see where a person came from and what they've achieved since then is cool, and I'm gonna be honest, getting a plushie after going through all that feels really cool. Years ago, there wasn't a thought in my mind that something like a plushie was even a prospect for me. And I'm not gonna lie, it's incredibly humbling that people actually want something that's a marketable little version of me to be in their house. And I feel the same way about like my friends who get the same opportunity. When I see the homie launch their own plushies or do anything else exciting and special to them, I feel a kind of pride about it. Like, fuck yeah, that's sick. People appreciate my boys the way I do, and they like what they do. I can't help but feel happy for them, because the fact something good is happening for them means something to me. And I imagine it's a similar feeling for a viewer who's been following them for years at this point. So when a creator says the line like, please don't turn me into a marketable plush, oh the effect is twofold. It lets you know, like, oh shit, cool merch of a thing I like. This would be cool to have. But also, the fact is, the thing you like is a real dude you vibe with. And it creates that sort of secondhand pride in seeing them get to the point where a plush of them is a thing that can actually happen. And getting one for yourself can feel like a celebration of that milestone. It's subjectively parasocial, but we'll get to that. Multiply that feeling across scores of dedicated viewers in a person's audience, and the excitement around it can be intensely communal. At the end of the day, if I'm shooting straight, it's fandom, where everybody in that fandom is a fan of an actual person and is invested in what that real person does and achieves. I think the strongest examples I've seen of this is in communities based around VTubers. As a default of the medium, the way each person visually presents themselves is intensely curated, and a lot of fanfare is made about when a VTuber gets a new design. And a new design can be representative of a certain era of a VTuber's career, where cementing that moment in time with a physical item like a plushie is kind of a no-brainer. Outside of maybe animation, VTubing is the most stylized way I can think of presenting yourself in content. And even then, the amount of hours you spend streaming as a VTuber with your audience far eclipses the amount of time an animator can spend with their audience, because animating takes a long time. Not that designing a VTuber doesn't, but the way a VTuber visually presents themselves to an audience is an explicit choice being made as opposed to a product of circumstance. For instance, Critical is known for his white shirt that he dons in almost every video, to the point where it's become a running gag in his community. It's something people noticed over a long time spent watching Charlie's content, and that's because he actually just wears a white shirt all the time. In contrast, let's take a VTuber like Shiabot. He's a friend of mine who had a new model debut recently, where every aspect of his visual presentation was an intentional choice that was then handcrafted by a person. The physical representation of Shia, the background that serves as his setup, everything about it was curated, all while it's him still puppeting that VTuber model. It is as close to a character that a real person can get. Fans of VTubers generally root for them very passionately, so when they say that, I have a new marketable plushie available now, people pop out with loyalty and support in ways rarely replicated in flesh space. To me, it's interesting, because I said that the marketable plushie meme has remained pretty static, but the truth is that, like, it started a little different than it actually ended up being cemented as. The mutations with the marketable plushie thing happened early on, and then those changes are what stuck. The term marketable plushie implies a sort of cash grab aspect to the plush, where if a company makes a plushie of a popular character, then it's sure to sell. It's almost derogatory in its phrasing. But the meaning, to me at least, is switched around when you're invested in not just a character, but the people responsible for that character. Even more so when the character itself is a real person like a creator is. At that point, getting to the status of having a marketable plushie has its meaning inverted, because the plushie comes as a triumph in a sort of underdog story. Underdog in this context meaning making anything happen at all on this bitch of an earth. The goal is still obviously to make money, that's how selling anything works, but who's being turned into the marketable plushie changes the context. For viewers, this is objectively parasocial, and I don't mean that as a criticism. The rules for engagement when liking a personality online are the same as liking pretty much anything else. People spend money buying merch of characters they like, and I think it's totally fair to spend cash on things for your own enjoyment. Interacting with anything you like in a healthy way is the way to do it, and the criteria is the same with creators. Be genuinely supportive and happy for them, but also understand, like, you are a viewer of someone you don't know, but if they're still the right. Having been on both sides of the equation, it's a genuinely dope experience to be a part of a community that's watched a creator grow from the bottom up, achieve new heights, and know that, like, we on some level, if not individually but as a collective, had a hand in that person getting there. It's always to be done within moderation and knowing where the boundaries lie, but enjoying things in a responsible way is, like, the whole point of being alive. And recognizing that online communities of all types can be strong and passionate, no matter their size, is part of why I really like YouTubers. They are a company that does collabs with some of the biggest IP on Earth. They do stuff with Nickelodeon, they have Hatsune Miku collabs with Schlatt's Remy plushies, and even with that level of success they have out there, they still go out of their way to collaborate with creators at all levels who have built up strong communities of their size. For example, my buddy Joko has a very respectable 200,000 subscribers on his main channel and over 100,000 on his second. And he also fosters a really dedicated viewership on Twitch. They love him, man. And he has been doing YouTube's drops for a lot longer than I have. Where the truth of the matter is, the opportunity came to him because he's an excellent entertainer who cultivated a really strong connection with the audience he had. Hell, I'm part of that audience. I have a carpet with his face on it sitting in my home. The way I view it is that you don't need to be like a million sub Andy for YouTubers to work with you or to be successful in this in general. Success to me is being fulfilled. You just need to find the community of people who really fuck with you and what you do. I try to think of it as an example of goals actually being achievable in life, no matter how out of reach they might seem. Lord knows YouTube did most of my life, and even sometimes after it had already, and plenty of times after it actually saw saw some traction. It's some optimism I think I and a lot of us have to remind ourselves to hold on to, that plushies can be emblematic. Anyways, Kwite YouTube's plushie available now for the next 2 weeks only. They're gone November 5th. I really hope y'all enjoy getting these as much as I did making it and making this video. Anyways, this has been Kwite, and I'll see you in your home if you choose to buy the 9-inch version of me.